Good afternoon. Oh, thank you. You're all very kind. So quality in agility. So this track, I've been a track host a couple of times for sort of GOTO events or QCon kind of Trifork events, and I'm fairly kind of casual about it. I just get an idea for a track and I sort of think, I basically get some people along who I want to listen to and I get to listen to them. Jesper's put a load of work into this track. He's got this whole vision for, you know, looking at agile as a movement, as maybe kind of become a bit too tunnel vision and needs to step back and look at itself from the outside. And for each slot in his track, he had an idea of a theme in agile that he wanted to cover. So Sarah early on was talking about people over process and how we'd lost this kind of stuff. And so the reason I got involved in this track is I got an email from Jesper. He said, I'm working with people who've been working with Agile for a long time and they still have, I just feel like they still haven't grasped the basics. And I thought, that's actually quite terrifying. But also it resonated with me as something that I'd seen. And it also resonated with me that I kept checking myself and finding that the things I was doing weren't actually, if you go back and look at the basics of Agile, they've kind of diverged a bit from what we tend to do now. So he said, can you talk a bit about quality? And I was like, okay, so Agile and quality. How am I going to get everything I want to say about Agile and quality down into an hour? So this is a new talk. I've got no idea. This will either be like a 22-minute talk or a 4-hour talk. So we'll see how we're doing after about 50 minutes and maybe kind of go on into the next session. So roughly, then, I wanted to start by thinking, what do we mean by quality? When we talk about quality, this word quality, and I was thinking about it from various different people's perspectives, and those of you who follow my blog will know I've been having a few interesting interactions with the software craftsman movement over the last few months. Well-crafted software, that's quality. Quality is all about crafting well-crafted software. Well, again, if you look at this from a lean perspective in terms of kinds of non-value adding waste, then maybe we could think in terms of overly well-crafted software is actually overwork. That is a well-defined, clearly understood form of waste. So we're now putting waste on a pedestal and saying we should aspire to that. Well-crafted, when we build up these massive suites of tests around things that we've written 100 times before and are probably not going to break this time either. You know, maybe that's an excess of inventory. Maybe we're building up too much stuff here. Who knows? So that's one possible definition of quality. What else? Well, we hit the original estimates. It was a quality delivery. It came in on time. It came in on budget. It came in within scope. Well, is that quality or is that life imitating fiction? You know, we made this thing up at the beginning of the project when we knew least about it and we set these things out, budgets and whatever, and we brought the thing in on budget. Well, maybe if we'd had a bigger budget, we would still have come in on budget. If we'd had more time or less time, would we still have come in? It's different software each time, so is that a quality solution? Don't know. We hit all the KPIs. Some of us are in these kind of more enterprisey organizations where you have key performance indicators around software delivery, around productivity, around all sorts of usually cost accounted silo type metrics. And as long as our delivery hits these metrics, then we'll call that quality. Okay? What do we really mean? So in, it must have been 1980 something, I think. A chap called Robert Persig wrote a beautiful book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Have any of you read it? A few hands, a depressingly small number of hands. It's a really important book. I would suggest going and reading it. So the premise of the book is it's a road trip with two pairs of people. It's a husband and wife and a father and son. And they go off on their road trip across the States on their motorbikes. And the father sees the motorbike as this thing that he kind of rides and it gives him a great experience and whatever, and his son's much more analytical and he's a kind of tinkerer and he kind of disassembles the motorbike and he thinks of it in terms of the components. But what Robert Persig does right at the beginning in the preface to the book is, it turns out he's an English teacher, he's a teacher in a school, and he was struggling with this concept of quality, and as an experiment, it was a class of 11-year-olds writing. So we'd got these 11-year-olds to write one of these kind of what I did on my vacation, one-page or two-page things that kids do at the end of the summer break. And he said, okay, so he read to the class of 11-year-olds. He said, okay, I'm going to read each one of these out anonymously, and I want you to put your hands up whether you think this is a quality piece of writing. And so he'd read it out, and some hands would go up and some hands would go up, and he'd put it on and he ended up ranking all these things in terms of how much the degree of quality that these kids voted that these things had. He then took the same set of writing, like 11-year-olds' holiday journals, to his postdoc English language research students, and did the same experiment. And he said, let's see, tell me, obviously this is written by 11-year-olds, but in the context of writing by 11-year-olds, which ones of these do you think are quality writing? And he ended up with exactly the same outcome. So in other words, there was something that went across like generations and education and whatever, that people could discern quality. And he posited quite a deep shift in thinking. So we in the West particularly, our thinking is based on two what are called dichotomies. The dichotomy of good and bad, which we call ethics, and the dichotomy of true and false, which we call logic. And so you think like your legal system. Your legal system is based on, the laws themselves are based on ethics. It's bad to steal and kill people. The due process in law is based on logic. We need to prove beyond reasonable doubt that you did this bad thing. And so they're the kind of the two dichotomies that we carry around with us and use to reason with the world. And Persick suggested that quality actually is its own dichotomy. There's a scale by which things either do or don't have quality. And it's completely undefinable outside its own context, in the same way good and bad is. If you take ethics out, it's really difficult to define good and bad. If you take logic out, it's really difficult to define true and false. They just are. And in the same way, you've got quality and not quality as a scale. And he started this thought experiment that said, imagine our legal system in a court of law, rather than saying we want to prove beyond reasonable doubt, it's we want to hear all the arguments and then decide what would be the most quality judgment in this case. Would the most quality judgment of this woman who was abused for many years by her husband, finally snapped and killed him, is the quality judgment to lock her up? Or is it to do something else? So this is what he's talking about with quality. So we've got this idea of like, you'll know it when you see it. So quality is a thing you'll know when you see. And in that context, it's actually really hard for us to ask our stakeholders to define quality metrics, because you can't, unless you've already got this self-defining construct that says things do or don't have quality. So we use the other dichotomies we've got as a poor approximation for that. So we have KPIs and values, and if it's below this value, above or below this value is a true-false thing. We can think about that. Or whether something is good or bad to use, we can think about that. But having quality and not having quality, we don't think of as a first-class dichotomy in its own right. So what does that mean in terms of a quality product then? So I've got the software, we're going to produce some software, we're going to produce a product. What does quality mean? So I've been hearing a lot about, or learning a lot really, I guess, trying to learn about user experience and the concept of user experience. And I thought user experience meant, good user interfaces and that kind of thing. And then I came across a fabulous book called The Design of Everyday Things, and another fabulous book called Don't Make Me Think. And these books are about obviousness. They're about the fact that if you have a handle on a door, your instinct is to pull on the handle because it's a handle. So if you put a handle on the push side of a door, people aren't going to like you very much. And then there's doors in context. So for instance, a door to a public lavatory, for instance, you actually want it to open outwards because you've just washed your hands, your hands are clean. You now don't want to have to go and turn a handle on a door where maybe someone who went before you didn't wash their hands and now you go back out into the world with dirty hands. So just things like that about how to design everyday things. And so rather than using the term user experience, which is kind of overloaded, I've started thinking in terms of user empathy. So user empathy says you put yourself in someone else's head. Exactly what Sarah was talking about earlier on with walking a mile in someone else's shoes, which has the added benefit that you're a mile away from them and you've got their shoes. But No, so user empathy, think about it from the point of view of these people. One of my former colleagues at ThoughtWorks, a chap called Mark McNeil, he has this lovely phrase when he's talking about user experience. He says, think about the people whose lives you touch. Yeah? So when you're writing software, when you're delivering software, when you're managing the teams you manage, think about the people whose lives you touch. You're going to write some software. Some people are going to maybe use that software 8 hours a day. That's their job. Their job is to use your application. The thought of the design you put into that application, the quality of the user experience in that application determines an individual's actual happiness in their work. That's a huge responsibility. Okay? And I don't think we think that through very much. We think about how we're going to deliver this next feature off the feature list. No. We're not thinking someone is going to use this and it will either make them happy to use this or it will not make them happy to use this. They will have a quality or non-quality experience, and it's a massive scale. It's a continuum, and I get at this point to determine where on that continuum their general level of happiness is going to be. That's a big responsibility. So what else have we got? We've got appropriate attention to non-functional requirements. What I mean by that is the kind of not too much, not too little. So, NFRs often get pushed to the side because they're not sexy, but a quality product is a product that's available when it's supposed to be available. When's the last time the internet didn't work? The internet's quite robust. The internet doesn't need rebooting very often. Yeah, when's the last time someone rebooted the internet? When's the last time Google wasn't available? Okay, and it was to do with Google rather than to do with your path to Google, like your router at home or whatever. And again, there's a cost-benefit trade-off here. So appropriate attention to non-functional requirements. Think about performance. Think about, is it fast enough? So the difference, the user perception difference between something taking 20 milliseconds and 2 milliseconds is negligible. Okay? The difference between 20 and 100 milliseconds, you're now talking about a tenth of a second, that's user perceptible. Now, once you start getting into hundreds of milliseconds, in other words, tenths of seconds, you're actually impacting the user's experience of something. So the amount of effort it takes to get from, say, 200 milliseconds for a user interaction response, feedback, versus 20 is quite important. From 20 down to 17, wow, we've got aliens. Cool. So hang on. Where was I? I was talking about appropriate attention to non-functional requirements. But then a quality product from the point of view of the people who are looking after your product. Let's think about those guys. If your product is easy to deploy, if it's easy to manage, i.e. to see what's going on with it, it's easy to, when something unexpected happens, it's easy to diagnose what happened, and when making it easy to fix. All these things are different axes of quality. They're things that you can choose to do stuff about. So this is about having a sustainable environment. Is it sustainable to do work here, or is it getting exponentially harder to make changes every time we